game is endless. Just when you think you know how everything works, you find a paradigm-shifting revelation just around the corner. Then you recontextualize everything, and then you go through it again, and every single time I'm just revising. Oh my god, when does this game ever stop? For example, I'll give you a little quick insight, is that I was learning and doing the Royal Guard mechanic, and then I was watching, okay, well, how do people use the Royal Guard mechanic? How do they use it to get S ranks? And then one day I'm watching this Japanese player use Royal Guard in the start of stage 1 and kill 3 enemies instantly. And I'm like, what? How did that happen? And so I'm sitting there like, okay, he only parried once. Then he gets this instant kill. What's going on here? So then I get real close to the computer and I play back the footage like 1 frame at a time. I'm like watching, what is he doing? How is he able to do this? And then I reverse engineer it and realize, oh, apparently Devil May Cry's Royal Guard attack mechanic has counter hit properties, where if you do it during a counter hit, it powers up and gets even stronger. I'm like,
What, Capcom?
what developer would think of this? Some point in this game's development, some were programming the Royal Guard attack mechanic. The guy's like, let's just throw in some counter hit properties to this. I think it's awesome. But the point I'm getting at is that we need to remember the context from which character action games, especially Devil May Cry, was spawned. What is the lineage? Where does this come from? And how is it actually very different from playing Elden Ring and then adding in air juggles or whatever these developers are going to do? Like, the massive difference in design philosophy between these two examples is not getting articulated and captured. And like I said, I'm not against the concept of adding in some fun, cool mechanics like that into the Souls clones, but what I want to point out here is how special and unique this Devil May Cry series was in their golden era, or at the end of their golden era, of beat-em-up, arcade, and fighting game design. And that Devil May Cry itself was influenced by Capcom's own lineage of fighting game development and beat-em-up development. And what Devil May Cry is kind of doing is marrying together these two elements in 3D and then slapping it into a survival horror context. And so, in terms of the lineage of this series, it is actually a combination of the 3 genres that Capcom themselves pioneered, or solidified, whichever word you want to use, where they set the template for fighting games with Street Fighter 2, with beat-em-ups, with Final Fight, and then survival horror with, of course, Resident Evil. You take these 3 design influences, you shove them all together, and basically what you get is Devil May Cry. What Devil May Cry is doing in terms of game mechanics is really unique, and it is something we're not going to see replicated anytime soon, because I don't think even modern-day Capcom could quite replicate what the hell they were doing back in the early 2000s, because if you go back to the context of the early 2000s and just game design during this era, this is my favorite era of game design, because it is the most technical, it is the most mechanically rich of all of video game history. This era, the early 2000s, the late 90s, all the arcade developers were really pushing game mechanics to the limits to where it overwhelmed most of the major player base. Look at all the popular stuff at this time. You got Street Fighter Alpha, you got Street Fighter 3, you got Virtua Fighter 3 to Virtua Fighter 4. You've got Guilty Gear XX to the many versions of Guilty Gear XX. And of course, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 And even on Nintendo's side, you've got Mario Sunshine and Super Smash Bros. Melee. This is just the era where it was in, it was hot to push the mechanical development of your game and of your series. And then that kind of fell apart because it turned out to be really overwhelming for players. And so since that point, the 2000s era, pretty much every other series has been backpedaling. And so going back to Devil May Cry 3, this is the era that game was born. And what Devil May Cry 3 is essentially trying to do is marry together the open-ended style of playing fighting game characters with the scoring arcade nature of arcade games. And that creates an interesting conundrum in terms of game design, because with fighting games, there is no objective, correct fighting game style. Whatever you do to win is correct, and everyone has their own different approach to winning. You have the Justin Wongs of the world who play very defensively. You got the aggressive guys like Kazunoko. You have a whole spectrum of different styles and approaches fighting game players can take into their game. And as long as it's getting the win, it is valid, at least in terms of the video game. You all can have your own opinions, but if the game sees you win, that is valid, whatever you did in the game design aspect. But in arcade scoring games, because you have the objective metric of score telling you objectively which playstyles are more effective and good than others, you lose that sort of freedom of expression, but the trade-off is you get contextual meaning and a way to evaluate the performance. So there's kind of an interesting trade-off there. The open-ended fighting game freestyle version, which can only be contextualized socially, essentially, or by tournaments, metagame elements outside the game itself. That is how we know which players are the best in the world, because of external metagame that people engage in. Or you can have the alternative, which is really cool in scoring games, of you can objectively say which player is the best in the world purely on numbers. Whoever gets the highest number is the best. Basically, that's how it works. And so both have their strengths and their weaknesses. And what Devil May Cry 3 especially is trying to do is marry these two conflicting design philosophies. They aren't naturally compatible with one another. And so Capcom is trying to make this fusion happen. And this is how you get the style system of Devil May Cry. And the style system is very interesting of a concept. And the way it works is a hybrid approach, where Capcom are trying to get you to play in specific restraints, but they're not going to be completely rigid in how they evaluate those constraints. This is where you get the ranks at the end of the stage, and these ranks are disconnected from one another, and you as the player need to marry together the different concepts. At least in 3, 4 actually sums them together, which is really interesting, but we'll talk about 4 later. But in 3, as long as you're balancing all of these different metrics together, you end up with an S rank at the end. You actually don't have to S rank everything. By the way, you can get an A, and a few of them, they will still sum together for an S. But as long as you get that S at the end, whatever you did to achieve that S is equal to whatever this other guy did to achieve his own S rank. So that is where style comes from. That's why it's called style, because if it was a true scoring system, one approach would be objectively better than another because you'd get a higher score. But because the style system is capping how far you can push the scoring elements of the game, essentially, it creates this sort of limit that makes a lot of play styles equally valid, but it does actually filter through some more degenerate play styles. So it isn't completely open-ended like with modern action games now, where there is no performance evaluation and it is all just purely subjective.
I learned early on when I started playing this game that people have a tendency of putting other people down for the way they play the game. It's a single player game, and everyone is, has the right to play it however they want, to have fun. But I noticed immediately that this is just the thing. You want to put people down for playing the game in any way that's different than you. So that's when I started imposing all these weird, totally arbitrary rules on myself, and then insulting everyone who doesn't agree.
there are some objective metrics that Capcom is wanting to see. They want you to do certain things, and they will reward you with the style ranks for that. So you have to play their game a little bit, but in that game, you're also allowed to express yourself. It's a really interesting way to approach this sort of mechanical performance style game design that not a lot of other series have attempted and hasn't really been iterated on much since this point. Where nowadays, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, you name it, modern action games now, a lot of them drop this concept of style or ranking or performance evaluation, and it's all purely subjective to how you feel about whatever people are doing. But I think this performance evaluation is core to character action, is core to the Devil May Cry series. Much more so than doing air juggles. There are tons of games out there that are lame or not that have air juggles and combos, and you can do little combo videos and say, oh, isn't the combat deep? Air juggles and technical things like that are not what make combat deep. What makes combat deep, like in Devil May Cry, is performance evaluation. Even if that performance evaluation is somewhat limited in Devil May Cry 3 because there is a cap to how far you can perform well, even that bar, asking at least that much of the player, brings them much deeper into the core game design than they would otherwise. Trust me, if you sit down and just play Devil May Cry 3 for survival and just getting through the end without dying, I mean, it is a cool game, it's still a lot of fun, but it isn't nearly as deep or engaging as if you have to then jump into this style performance metric system where everything starts to kind of matter. Like, a lot of stuff matters, and then a lot of, like, degenerate strategies that you could kind of use start to not be possible. For example, if you watch a lot of, like, combo mat and combo videos, one thing you can see people do is, like, launch every enemy into the air individually and, like, air combo them forever individually one by one. How you do that actually has to be a lot more nuanced and subtle if you're playing for ranks, because if you just spam the same move over and over and over, it actually drops rank. Even if you're having in the air juggling, you can't build rank just spamming the same move. So you have to engage with a lot more of what the game is going for, even with that certain requirement. But then there's other requirements that come in as well, like time. So you can't sit there and spam guns on things too much because you need to kill them quickly enough. Or you can't sit there and just kill one enemy one by one in Dante Must Die at least. You need to group kill them because you need to kill them faster together because of time. So there's a lot of different metrics and things that this performance evaluation system actually improves upon and makes the game design stronger. But none of that is being discussed or captured in today's conversation around character action games and this discussion around, well, Phantom Blade Zero is 70% Devil May Cry or Ninja Gaiden or whatever.
I don't know. I mean,
The game's yet to be released. I could be surprised, but let's say that I'm skeptical, especially since Stellar Blade made this very same claim, and it is it's nowhere near the depth or quality of Devil May Cry, and I think it's kind of misleading to even attempt to compare that game to Devil May Cry, and I talked all about that in my very beloved review of Stellar Blade. But what I'm getting at, and it's hard to face as a character action fan, is that the Devil May Cry era of action game design is over. It is something of the past in terms of mainstream relevance and popularity. I know everyone was excited about Devil May Cry 5, and I haven't fully analyzed Devil May Cry 5. I'm suspending my thoughts on that for the time being. But is Capcom in a rush to make Devil May Cry 6? And then the people who engaged with Devil May Cry 5, how deep does that go? And once the Devil May Cry crew retire, who's going to replace them? Who even has the talent, ability, and understanding to create games of the same mechanical depth and impressive balance as classic Devil May Cry? I mean, we've seen what Western developers are capable of doing when they are literally asked, make a Devil May Cry game. We see what they come up with. And we also see the reception to this game among mainstream critics, which was like, yeah, it's kind of close enough for me. I mean, I get it. Yeah, it's kind of there. Here's a depressing stat for you all. If you go ahead and fire up Metacritic, you will see that Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition actually has a lower Metacritic score than DM Definitive Edition on Metacritic. Isn't that a little bit disturbing? Am I the only one who sees a problem with this picture? DMC4 isn't a perfect game, but it is leagues, miles better, just at a core foundational level. I mean, this is the type of stuff I'm talking about. The reason why I wanted to make this video is because I do not want to see Devil May Cry's legacy and lineage just be simplified into the most surface element observations of its gameplay, so that when these new Souls-based action games come out and then claim to be 70% character action, I want there to be an understanding when I come into this review and say, it's not matching these elements, that we have a touchstone, a shared understanding of what makes Devil May Cry special, what makes it so unique, and something we're not going to see anytime soon. Because in order to catch up with what Devil May Cry was up to during that era would take a lot more fundamental shifts in how action games are designed now than just throwing in some auto combos or cool looking juggles or whatever they think is going to make it Devil May Cry. Because the problem with making a true Devil May Cry style game in the year 2024 is that its level of mechanical complexity and its level of just depth and inaccessibility is actually going to hurt your game in terms of sales. In modern game design philosophy, if you buy a game and then you start playing it and you need to pause the game and go and research how the mechanics work, and you need to go frame by frame in high-level gameplay videos to understand that certain moves have counter hits or just the overall picture of how things are coming together. Basically, if you need to study the game's fundamental mechanics in any sort of way, that is going to hurt your game in terms of sales, and it's going to hurt your game in terms of approachability. Modern developers know this. Everyone knows this. This is why Guilty Gear Strive is Guilty Gear Strive. And look at the sales data. Look at the sales and active player base of Guilty Gear XX and Guilty Gear Strive, or even Xrd in Strive. Look at the difference between these two. Look at the popularity of Dragon Ball FighterZ. I think Dragon Ball FighterZ was Ark's turning point for the worst, because they released that, they have the license, they have the simplified mechanics, they have massive sales, and they're like, boom, baby, it's Strive time. And we're seeing this across the board with many series. It would actually take a lot of balls and counterintuitive modern game design philosophy to create something that you could credibly claim as a real successor or 70% Ninja Gaiden or Devil May Cry. There's a reason why Capcom is like, Devil May Cry 6, I don't know. Or Team Ninja are like, Ninja Gaiden 4, I don't know. The reason for that is because the amount of dev costs and energy that go into making these games just mechanically and then balancing all of these mechanics is insane. It is actually unreal that Capcom were able to create something as dense and ambitious as Devil May Cry 3 in the first place. Devil May Cry 3 isn't the perfect game in a lot of ways, but it is absolutely one of the most ambitious games ever created. And the further I dig into the game, I'm like, when does it end? It just goes on and on and on. It's crazy how deep this game truly is. And it makes complete sense that Capcom's follow-up to Devil May Cry 3, DMC4, was such a complicated, messy game, and how it had so much trouble in development. And sure, Capcom are like, what the hell are we thinking? We're just building something that even we can't follow up on and manage. And especially since most of the player base out there, most of the critics out there, most of the gaming public out there don't even care, or the amount of people who are digging into the depths of these games versus the amount of people who just kind of play through them and engage them on the surface level, it makes complete sense in a grim way, in a sad way, that these Japanese developers were like, this isn't worth it. This is way too much. But that being said, I don't want to just skirt past what they actually accomplished. And I think that all needs to be re-examined and re-evaluated outside of just buzzwords and buzz phrases, because I'm finding it very frustrating right now that the way things are going, these games are just going to get lumped in as buzzwords for marketing purposes, and then modern developers making less ambitious games are going to get higher sales than these mad works of the past, and they're going to smugly think to themselves, yeah, we figured it out. We totally did it better than Capcom did. We saw what they were kind of trying to pull off in DMC3, but we figured out, yeah, really all that matters is just making the player feel accomplished or making the player feel like they're doing something technical, when really they're just mashing the same set of buttons over and over, or there's no performance analysis, just everything you do is great. This is going to be a tide I can see myself battling with these upcoming releases. It began with Stellar Blade. It's just going to continue release after release. I'll just continue to piss off the internet. Phantom Blade, Zero Next, and we'll just go down the line. But in the process, I'm hoping to at least point out what elements of the Devil May Cry series are so fantastic and so overlooked. And I know that they're overlooked because as I was working on my S ranks for Dante Must Die, and that project is still ongoing, but even in these early stages, as I was working on these S ranks, genuinely wondering about certain mechanics, like how exactly is the style rank score calculated, or how does the taunt actually work? When does it reset? What resets it? Is the reset context sensitive? Can this mechanic be abused? You know, all of these types of more in-depth mechanical questions that I've been trying to research. It's actually funny how little information there is on all this stuff. I'm sure there's some Japanese guide out there that just nails it all and explains it all, but in terms of like English written guides, you can find information about how the voice lines of Dante change based off of your style rank. But how exactly the style rank is calculated, you're going to have to figure that out a little bit on your own, and I'll cover that and all my DMC3 stuff coming up. But the point being, I think the true Devil May Cry era is behind us, unfortunately. We may get Devil May Cry 6, which will be really cool, but what I mean is that the era in which action games are pulling genuine influence from Devil May Cry outside of these surface elements, I think that's coming to an end. I mean, we're not even seeing style systems anymore. We're not even seeing performance ranking anymore. I think all of that is kind of coming to an end in terms of the more modern action game take on combat. And instead, we're just going to get modernized takes on this style of game design that are going to be a lot less interesting and ambitious, but will still get the credit for being character action, unfortunately. And so if you enjoyed this video, please check out my recent God Hand review, another all-time classic that I really dig into and I think more people should be checking out and paying attention to. And if you can, please like, subscribe, tell all your friends. I'm going full-time in September, and that is going to include a lot of Devil May Cry and Dark Souls and a lot of this character action in-depth analysis. That's a big project I have coming up in the horizon. So any Patreon support would be greatly appreciated. And keep an eye out because my next video is going to be my merch drive for my new shirt. I'm really excited for that, and that's going to really help contribute to me going full-time. So thank you very much. Adios, everyone. So thank you to the $5 patrons, 100, at Scrum Dice, Accepting Panda, At Will Coconut, Animal, AJA, Alexander Viper, Analgesic Productions, MPA, Arcade Hell, Arrow Viper, Out Align, Automane, B-Lit, B-Pit, Bo, Peter Games, Blog Hog, Board Basmati, 4D22, Chase Columbo, Chris Yusufovich, Christopher R, Product Burnout 3, Claire Clip, Blaine Binkley, Ivy Coyote, Toast, Color Boy, Cookset 666, Cookset Soup, Best Audio, Dances with Incels, Derek Griffin, Dave Hansen, David Andrus, David Crespo, Delta Tango 6, Dingo, DJ 420, Brizet, Drano, Dr. Bosky, Elvin Senza, Elias Alonso, Eric Houdini, FCK, Deluxe, Brisket, Brave for Human, Francisco, Freckle Lord, Full Set, Gameway Guru, East Machine, GPM, Gustavo Sanchez, Baru Khan, Hausu, Hero Deck, Kiki Hime, J-Dab, Jake Ryan, Jack Walsh, Jacob Valenzuela, J-Lab, JBRPG, Jeff Wolf, Jake Collins, John Kelly, John Longwalker, Josh Mayer, Jurgen, K, K2, Insane, Praise the Boys, Lauren Harrington, Lorraine, Blaze, Mario City, Mark Sloan, Boris Bar, Matt O'Leary, Maz, Young, Meister, Jam, Will Chamel, Monroe, Nathaniel Davis, Neil McRae, Neil Gitis, Vocal Googles, Powell, Pearl, Pedro Perez, Poorly Written Protagonist, Psycho Blizzard, Queen Charlene, Ralph Trujillo, Raul, Rapido, Real Ski, Red Bull's Time, Retro Schmupper, Rory Starks, Roll 015, Ryan Bartlett, Skyline City, Segfault, Chassis, Schmuck Junkie, Zero Pong, Sparta Man, Spiders SPG, Spongy, Steady AI, Steve Fiction, Street Magic, Super Punk, Transarian, Hayes Ryu, The Boot Rex, Dirty Screech, The N1, The Old Bensta, Tim French, Double Rizardi, Travis Arbon, Tsugumo, Tsumayu, Twilight DX, Unicorn Roots, Ursula, Mushi Mushi, Big Viper, Beautiful, Maggie Legs, What Is This, Zachary Patton, Zeo, and Zen Yoku.
One hour of Zen, one healthy meal, and 0 artificial flavors. Ben's Original.
With so many choices across the U.S., find Boston hotels even Yankees fans could love.
Dude.
No.
It's not good. Oh my god! We're on record though. Dude.
This pace was insane. Even scoring just one Tetris on the kill screen would have been enough for 1.4. But Joseph couldn't survive long enough to get a Tetris. He topped out just 10,000 points short. Still though, clearly he was closing in on 1.4 million. It seemed like it could be just days away. Well, on June 14th, 2020, Joseph started a game on level 18 rather than 19 and set a score of 1.384 million. This was the highest ever score from a level 18 start, a notable achievement. So, Joseph stopped recording on OBS and uploaded the video to YouTube. But then, he forgot to hit record again and continued playing for the record. Joseph was oblivious to the fact that his gameplay wasn't being saved. And hours later, he allegedly achieved a score of 1.439 million. Obviously, this game can't be viewed today. He was streaming it to a Discord call, though, and one of his friends was recording the audio of said call, where you can hear people freaking out at what Joseph was doing.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? 1.4.
But there's no video to go along with this. According to testimony from those who watched it live, this was a crazy game in the kill screen. It allowed him to blow past the 1.4 million barrier, but only a select few were able to see it. And even though there's no recording, Joseph knew what he had done and had accomplished his goal. To this day, he's still never gotten a 1.4 on video. The following few months in 2020 were a strange time in Tetris history. Everyone knew the record was 1.4 million, but it technically wasn't official. It would still be a big deal the first time someone achieved 1.4 on video. That July, a player named Scotto Bozo tried using RNG manipulation to crush the world record. He was able to use a task to predict which pieces would come and plan ahead accordingly. However, his score of 1.5 million was quickly deemed to be a different category. So, the focus was back on trying to break 1.4. And while there were many new players getting into the game, one stood above the rest. His name was Dog Playing Tetris. In June 2020, he became the second person ever to achieve a score of 1.3 million. He was trying to get 1.4 million alongside Joseph. And while Joseph stopped playing after his unrecorded 1.4, Dog continued trying. He was perceived as the most likely person to pull it off. Dog was a hyper-tapper like Joseph, so he had the ability to play for a while on the kill screen. And by that fall, his score was up past 1.35 million. He was closing in, and his next PB could be the one. In October, he managed to get a max out early in level 24. This was definitely on pace for 1.4 million. But the Tetrises kept coming, and by the time he hit the kill screen, his score was already at 1.367 million. He only needed 33,000 points on the kill screen. Dog Playing Tetris had to hold it together. He missed it by 14,000. This was still a new high score, but not enough to break 1.4. Even months later, the world had yet to see a score over 1.4 million on video. The combination of getting to level 29 on a good pace, and then getting enough points on the kill screen, was just too much to ask. It almost mirrored the max out claims from decades prior. Even though a 1.4 million score had very likely happened, there was still no video of one for the world to see. It remained a nearly impossible score that existed only as a legend. Now, you might think this is all a build-up to someone finally breaking through, but that's not what happened. No, something much bigger was brewing in the background. While much of the community was focused on trying for 1.4 million, little did any of them know that Tetris was about to go through a revolution. Everything was about to change.
First piece of music I released as Earth Eater was just a video that I made. After that, I got booked in Japan.
Let's go.
Yeah.
What?
Cheer it up with all new Fast Twitch energy sticks. Lowe's knows when you need a new appliance, you want it at the right price. Save now on Samsung bespoke refrigerators.
Use Hydro Boost water cream 9 times the hydration for replenished, dewy, glowy skin. Grab at your nearest store today.
Is this it?
For years, there had been two ways to play NES Tetris: DAS and hypertapping. DAS was certainly easier, but hypertapping had higher potential. That's how players were able to get points on the kill screen. Well, by 2020, the game's demographic at the top level had shifted younger, and virtually all of these new top players were hypertappers. In fact, during that year's Classic Tetris World Championship, all of the players in the top 8 were hypertappers. It had taken over at the top level. But as dominant as this technique was, it was quite difficult. Not many people could match that fast while still retaining good control. It limited the number of record contenders, and those who could hypertap sometimes developed arm and hand issues. Hypertapping was powerful, but it was still far from an ideal technique. So in 2020, the game's new generation began looking for alternative techniques to match the D-pad. The leading theory was to try using multiple fingers instead of just one. Gaming legend Flyheck had a method for using 8 fingers on an arcade button, letting it match up to 30 times per second. He also had a modified method for the smaller buttons of an NES controller. However, Tetris players had to match the D-pad, and they struggled to adapt either of these methods. The D-pad seemed to simply be too small to use multiple fingers on. They needed a bigger button. That's where a player named Cheese found something brilliant. He watched Flyhex videos and a matching video from Silverboxer, then combined them into his own technique. If the NES D-pad was too small of a button, why not use the entire back of the controller as a button? By resting a finger on the D-pad, you can roll your fingers along the back to push the controller into it repeatedly. This allows you to rapidly press the D-pad up to 4 times, or 5 times with the thumb at the end. That's just enough to move any piece to the far left or right, and you can reach speeds upwards of 20 presses per second, twice as fast as hyper tapping. It's also much easier on the hand and arm, and allowed for much more precision. As soon as Cheese found this technique, he knew it had the chance to break NES Tetris. He had just discovered Tetris' third playstyle, rolling. While rolling clearly had the most potential of all 3 techniques, it was also quite tricky to learn. Even though Cheese had discovered rolling, he struggled to use it for the first few months, but he still had a head start over other players. And eventually, he started to get good with it. By early 2021, he was using it whenever he reached the kill screen. And it quickly became clear that he was able to do things that nobody else could. Cheese wasn't just playing on the kill screen, he was thriving. The best hyper tappers could last a few levels on the kill screen, but with rolling, Cheese found himself making it all the way to level 40. And remember, the kill screen kicks in way back at level 29. Simply put, the kill screen had lost its meaning. It no longer marked the automatic end of your game, at least if you were able to roll like Cheese could. By mid-2021, Cheese had the potential to take the score record, and thanks to rolling, his strategy was much different than those who came before him. His emphasis was less on maximizing points before the kill screen, but rather going as deep as possible on the kill screen while landing Tetrises. This meant he wouldn't need such a crazy score going into level 29. If he could then last long enough on the kill screen, he could beat the score record anyway. That June, Cheese played games to qualify for the July monthly tournament. On June 30th, he got a game that reached 1 million points by level 26. This was roughly 200k behind the world record, but Cheese knew he could make up those points on the kill screen. He reached level 29 and immediately misdropped a J-piece. This could be a death sentence for a hyper tapper, but for a roller, it was an easy recovery. And from there, the gameplay just got easier. $1.461 million. Cheese had just smashed the world record. He had just cleared 80 lines on the kill screen and gotten 5 Tetrises in the process. These were worth about 40,000 points each, and were only realistic with rolling. For any top player who was still hyper-tapping, this game eliminated all doubt. Rolling was the future of NES Tetris. So, throughout 2021, the game's best players all improved at rolling. Previously, 1.4 million was about the limit for the score record, but now, there was no telling how high it could go. Cheese had made it to level 37, but if someone could last even longer on the kill screen, or get more points before the kill screen, then they could beat the world record. The big question was, who would be the next person to do it? Well, Dog Playing Tetris was the winner of the most recent World Championships, while players Pixel Andy and Huffaluffagus came in second and third place. Meanwhile, Cheese was still an active player, and he was the best at rolling. All 4 of these players were top contenders, and they each had a good chance at raising the score record. However, in a surprise to most of the community, a player named Hydrant Dude moved into second place right behind Cheese. Hydrant Dude was more known for his contributions other than his gameplay. He'd made numerous ROM hacks of Tetris, and later published videos explaining the game's code and inner workings. Beyond that, he was also a good player, but not usually considered one of the absolute best in the world. But that changed when he posted a score of 1.445 million. Because Hydra Dude had developed one particularly important skill. He was really good at rolling. And that meant he could last a long time on the kill screen. Now just 16,000 points behind the record, Hydra Dude pushed onward. And in September, he had a game that entered the kill screen at just over 1.1 million points. This pace was nothing too special, and he'd need more than 300,000 more points to break the record. But Hydra Dude decided to take a different approach now. Instead of going for Tetrises, he was going to try to last as long as possible. He would have to survive for probably 15 or so levels if he wanted to accumulate 300,000 points. But like I said, Hydra Dude was really good at rolling.
There you go. There's a 19. Is that world record? Did I actually just...
2 years ago, Hydra Dude believed 1.4 million would never happen. Now, he had just broken the world record with 1.464 million points. And he had survived all the way to level 44. At this point, it was seeming increasingly likely that 1.5 million was on the horizon. Although Hydra Dude had survived so long on the kill screen, his pace entering it wasn't anything special. If he could score a few more points beforehand, 1.5 million could be a reality. Well, Hydra Dude kept playing, and just a few days later, he got the pace he was looking for. 1.35 million entering the kill screen. This was nearly a quarter million ahead. After landing 3 Tetrises on the kill screen and making it to level 41, Hydra Dude finally topped out. But his score wasn't 1.5 million. It was 1.6 million. He had skipped straight over an F score and rolled the hexadecimal digit back to 0. This was the first ever rollover in NES Tetris history, and it was also a 160,000 point increase over the world record. Hydra Dude had proven that he was no fluke. His Tetris skills were legit. But he also had some heavy competition. As more time passed, the top players got better and better at rolling, and by late 2021, Huffaluffagus was making a run at the record. Huff was already a world-class hyper tapper, finishing second place in the 2020 World Championships. But once rolling became dominant, he made the switch in technique, and was able to nearly reach 1.4 million. Huff was notably a very conservative player on the kill screen. He played even safer than Hydra Dude, rarely going for Tetrises and just trying to survive. In November 2021, Huff had a game that reached the kill screen at 1.15 million. This was nearly 200,000 behind the record, and didn't seem to have much of a chance. But then, he put his survival mode into full effect, and the level counter climbed higher and higher. Level 35, then 40, and then 45. Huff had only landed 2 Tetrises, but he was somehow closing in on the record. A couple minutes later, Huff reached level 50. This was the highest level anyone had ever reached in NES Tetris. Finally, on level 52, Huff topped out. His score, 1.676 million, a new world record for score, level, and points on the kill screen. His survival playstyle had worked to perfection, and it was unbelievable to watch. He had lasted through 23 levels on the kill screen. Rolling had forever changed NES Tetris. Gone were the days of needing to squeeze out every point before the kill screen ended your game. Now, players could just survive longer to make up those points. How high could this score go?
What the fuck? Why am I halfway through this video? Never watched it.
Need to replace Monkey? With Chewy Auto Ship, get it delivered again and again And get 35% off your first auto ship order.
Welcome to the Credit Karmaverse. Here we monitor your finances and alert you to changes big and small so you can enjoy less stress and more peace of mind. Simply scan your screen to experience Intuit Credit Karma for yourself.
When the moves are sweet, and those chocolate chips just can't be beat.
Want to test drive US Cellular's nationwide 5G coverage?
Yeah.
Download our app. Want to do it even faster?
Here we go.
US Cellular works great out here. Wow, still have 5G here too. Hey, I wonder if US Cellular lets me stream in my... Yep, it's working.
Try out our nationwide 5G coverage free for 30 days. Download the US Cellular Try Us app today.
By late 2021, the Tetris community was thriving. This was the most active it had ever been, and there was lots of competition for the score record. Rolling had given players who couldn't hypertap a second chance. They too now had a chance to snag the world record. And even though the top score was 1.67 million, it was climbing so fast that it seemed like a 2 million point game wasn't far away. However, over the next few months, it became very hard to track what the game's true world record was, all because of a practice known as vaulting.
Apparently I started this video like not at the beginning. That's not good, bro.
This is
Tetris. We all know it, and we all love it. Few games have had the lasting legacy of Tetris. There have been versions released on nearly every console and smartphone ever made. And to this day, these new versions remain popular among fans and casual gamers alike. But perhaps the most well-known version of Tetris is the version released on the Nintendo Entertainment System back in 1989. Gamers never stopped playing it ever since its initial release, and in recent years, it's absolutely exploded in popularity. There are huge in-person tournaments, monthly competitions online, and most importantly, a crazy chase for the high score world record. This record has had 35 years of history, featuring some of the best players to ever pick up an NES controller. And it has one of the most insane stories from start to finish that I've ever seen. This is the history of NES Tetris World Records. And now a word from this video's sponsor, Opera GX. Look, we all know that Opera GX is the best web browser for gamers. It's easy to switch to, uses GX control to limit your use of resources, and is super customizable. But today, we're introducing its newest feature, a Summoning Salt GX mod. It has an awesome retro gaming wallpaper, as well as custom sound effects featuring yours truly. So here it is. Thanks. It's super easy to add. Just go to the GX store, type in Summoning Salt, and hit install. But there's also thousands of other mods to pick from. And that's not all Opera GX does. There's also GX Corner, where you can stay up to date with the latest in gaming news, deals, and even get free games, all in one place. There's also new features with AI, saving you time by summarizing articles or talking with ChatGPT on the sidebar. If you want the best web browser out there, download Opera GX using my dedicated tracking link. Just click the link in the description or pinned comment. Thanks again to Opera GX for sponsoring this video. There are two main concepts to understand in NES Tetris, the scoring and the level system. We'll start with the scoring. Like with most versions of the game, you accumulate points in NES Tetris by clearing lines. You get a different amount of points depending on how many you clear at once, but by far the most valuable score is getting a Tetris. The only way to score one of these is by using the long piece vertically to clear 4 lines. So ideally, players try to score as many Tetrises as possible by leaving a column open on the right side to drop a long bar when it comes. Then there's the level system. The higher the level, the more points you get per line cleared. So ideally, you want to start on the highest level possible, which is level 19. However, on level 18, blocks descend a row every 3 frames, while starting on level 19, they descend a row every 2 frames, which is significantly harder. So, top players would generally start on level 18, where they could play for a while at a more reasonable speed at barely any score cost. After 130 lines cleared at level 18, the game transitions to level 19, and then moves up a level for every additional 10 lines. Luckily, levels 19 through 28 all have the same descent speed, although you keep earning more points as the level increases. This is an extremely brutal speed to play on, but if you manage to make it all the way through level 28, you reach level 29, also known as Tetris's kill screen. A kill screen is a level deep into a game that's usually impossible to beat because of a glitch. Pac-Man has the most famous one. The game's 256 board has a glitched right side and doesn't spawn all the dots needed to beat it. Donkey Kong has another example, where you run out of time just seconds into the game's 117th screen. Tetris's kill screen, on the other hand, has nothing to do with the glitch. It's the intended end to the game, because starting on level 29, pieces begin to fall so fast that it becomes unplayable. This is Tetris's kill screen. Even if you begin holding a direction before the piece spawns, it's physically impossible to move the piece to the side in time. Pieces descend a row every single frame, twice the speed of level 28. Now, it's actually possible to process what's happening at this speed and know where you want the pieces to go. But the fact is, you just can't get them there. It's a game hardware limitation rather than a human hardware limitation. If you're very lucky, you might not need to move your pieces far and you can clear a line or two. But just like Pac-Man or Donkey Kong, your game is bound to end within seconds after reaching Tetris's kill screen. So the game is definitely over at level 29. But before that point, you have 230 lines to work with and try to score as many points as possible. It just so happens that the point display in the upper right corner only has 6 digits, meaning the highest score it can display is 999,999 points. So naturally, the question arose, was it possible to max out the score before the kill screen kicked in? Well, in order to get a max out, you have to make the most of your 230 lines. That means getting as many Tetrises as possible while avoiding other clues that eat into your 230 lines, otherwise known as a burn. It's extremely risky to play this way. You might need to build your stack up very high while waiting for a long bar. And there's not a moment of rest. You can't break your focus for even a second. But as brutal as the difficulty is, it's technically just possible to max out the score before the kill screen kicks in. And there are actually reports of people doing it all the way back in the 90s. It's difficult to determine how to treat these claims. Standards were different back then, and none of these claims have a full video to go along with them. However, some have more proof than others. Thor Ackerland, winner of the 1990 Nintendo World Championships, is reported to have maxed out the game in the early 90s. He didn't record his game, but being the literal winner of the Nintendo World Championships, he was one of the best Tetris players in the world at the time. Judging by his skills and the testimony of people who watched him play, it's very likely that his claim was legitimate. Another max out claim appeared in a 1992 edition of Nintendo Power magazine from a player named Scott Anderson. Very little is known about Anderson today, but in order to get your score in Nintendo Power, you did need to have photo proof, so there's a decent chance his score was legit too. And another player, JW Tetris, claimed a max out back in 1996 that seemed to have no proof, but 25 years later, he managed to uncover a VHS tape of the end screen that, sure enough, showed all nines. While it still lacks concrete video proof, this is probably the claim with the most evidence, and is very likely legit. Then, by the 2000s, all sorts of max-out claims appeared on internet forums. None of them had video proof, and honestly, they're really hard to judge. Some seem more suspicious than others, but just like with the claims from the 90s, it's really impossible to say which of these internet claims were legit. Some provided their names, while others used pseudonyms or usernames. In 2001, a max-out claim popped up on PlutoBseen.com from someone named Jonas. Just like all the other claims, Jonas didn't have any proof to back up his score, so his claim was lumped in with all the rest. However, in 2005, a man named Trey Harrison was trying to accumulate videos of Tetris performances to put up on his website, TetrisMaster.com. He was looking for a recorded max out, and sure enough, in the replies, up pops Jonas again, saying he just recorded one on tape. Jonas dropped the video off at Trey's house. Trey uploaded it onto his website. And it was then that the world was first able to see on video a max-out score of NES Tetris. A score showing all nines by future Tetris legend, Jonas Neubauer. What you're watching is a massive piece of gaming history. These scores have been rumored for over a decade, but finally, one was captured on video. And the footage is very impressive. Jonas started on level 18, and to make the level transition, he first had to clear 130 lines. He ended up getting 92 of those lines via Tetrises for maximum points, while just 38 were from burns. From there, Jonas was playing at the brutal speed of level 19, but he still had to keep landing Tetrises. His score was inching up as the levels climbed higher. He needed the max out before hitting level 29. On level 28, he was still 60,000 points away, with only 10 lines to work with. But he managed to get one Tetris, and then with just a single line to go before the transition, he got one final Tetris. The kill screen kicked in, and the score read all nines. Over the course of 8.5 minutes, Jonas had hit a max out on NES Tetris. And finally, it was documented for anyone to see. The feedback online was all positive. Everyone was thrilled to be able to watch an official Tetris max out. However, this video did have one problem. There was no game audio included. That meant Jonas couldn't submit it as a world record anywhere. But that didn't take away from the legitimacy of the performance. Jonas Neubauer had established a name for himself as a Tetris master. Only question was, now that someone had maxed out the game, what was there left to do?
Colgate Optic White's unique technology gives you a visibly brighter smile in just 3 days. Sling into the fun and unlock your creativity with Lego Marvel Spider-Man sets. Each set sold separately.
A $300 travel credit and a reminder to take your PTO. Add more to every getaway with Chase Sapphire Reserve.
Over the following few years, while competitive retro gaming was still in its infancy, more people gravitated toward playing NES Tetris. Even though Jonas had maxed out the score, it remained a popular game, and others tried to replicate his achievement. Between 2008 and 2014, More than a dozen other people were able to achieve max outs in NES Tetris. And even though their scores were officially tied, there were still ways to compare max outs to each other. Ultimately, two different methods of competing became popular. Method number 1, going for the earliest possible max out. In Jonas's game from 2005, he hit the max out right as the level transitioned to 29. In other words, at the last possible moment. But the more Tetrises you hit, the earlier you can max out, and the more impressive the achievement. In April 2009, Harry Hong produced the first reported max out with game audio, and he was able to get the max out slightly earlier than Jonas, late in level 28 rather than on the transition into level 29. Harry was one of several people who claimed the max out on internet forums years prior, but now he had recorded proof too. In early 2012, a player named Matt Bucco recorded a game where he maxed out in mid-level 26, much quicker than previous max outs. He landed Tetris after Tetris starting in level 19, which was where he pulled away from previous players. And then, there were a couple claimed early max outs. Harry Hong claimed an early level 26 max out on tape, but he didn't upload the score, only claiming it on a Tetris forum. And in August 2014, a player named Terry Purcell reportedly maxed out in late level 25. This score used to have video, but it's since been deleted from YouTube. Most of these players' only goal was to get an early max out. As soon as that happened, they stopped playing and let the game end, even if it was several levels before the kill screen. However, not everyone did this, and that's why there was a second method of competing. Playing the game all the way to the kill screen, and then manually calculating the score later. In other words, trying for the highest score possible. Even though the score doesn't display higher than all nines, you can still add up all the points achieved after this to determine your true score. For instance, in Jonas's first ever max out, he got a Tetris while his score read this. That meant he added 36,000 points, and his score actually finished at 1,018,160 points. And so, this became another method of determining whose max out was best. In 2008, Jonas achieved another kill screen that finished slightly higher than his 2005 max out, 1,023,860 points. However, since he used a camera from the 1800s, this was never verified as an official world record. In 2011, while recording himself for a documentary, Thor Ackerland achieved a score of 1,043,000 points. And a couple years later, a player named Ben Mullen took the score even higher, 1,071,000 points, before the kill screen took over to end his game. However, if the players going for the earliest max out had finished out their games, it's possible they would have achieved higher scores than these. Terry Purcell's level 25 max out is reported to have finished all the way at 1.195 million, but without video proof, this can't be verified. And although Matt Bucco's score of level 26 cuts off right here, he claims to have kept playing this game all the way to the kill screen. And in the comments, he says he'd upload the rest when he got home. Well, it's 12 years later, and apparently Matt still hasn't returned home. So, the community was split between these two methods. Some wanted to go for the earliest max out, while others wanted to go for the highest score. The big problem was the score display. Since it only had 6 digits, it wasn't intuitive to keep playing after it maxed out. It led to two different sides of competitive play. And these sides wouldn't converge until one key event in 2015. This is a Game Genie code discovered by Max-Out player Josh Tolles. It changes the leading digit of the score into hexadecimal, meaning that after 9, the score keeps counting up. A represents 1 million, B represents 1.1 million, and so on. This meant that the max out no longer applied, and the score was no longer capped at 1 million. So, it ultimately garnered the nickname the Uncapped Code. Josh posted his code on the Tetris forums, and it was treated as a fun novelty, but some saw potential for more with it. In April 2015, Harry Hong began attempts to set a new high score with the uncapped code. On April 23rd, he played a game that maxed out in level 28, then took it to the kill screen and finished with 1,101,000 points. This was the first verifiable game to score over 1.1 million. And a few days later, he got one even better. A max out in level 26 that ultimately finished at 1,150,000 points. But after these records from Harry, the competition for the high score record died down. Harry Hong was one of few players who both cared about the high score record and was potentially good enough to improve it. So, when he stopped trying for it, there was no competition to take it from him. Instead, in 2016, he came up with the goal of achieving as many max outs as he could in a year, rather than improving the uncapped record. 268 max outs later, the high score remained at 1.15 million. But in 2017, Harry came up with a new goal for his stream. He was going to go back to playing with the uncapped code and try for a 1.2 million point game. This would surpass the highest claims from over the years and be an undisputed world record. Harry played for weeks, building up his skills but falling short of the 1.2. He'd need an early max out, in level 25 or better, and then still need to land several more Tetrises before the kill screen. A score like this demanded near perfection. After months of attempts, on April 14th, 2017, Harry got a good score going. Max out in mid-level 25, Harry was on pace for it. From this point, he needed at least 5 Tetrises before hitting the kill screen on level 29. Harry got his Tetrises, but was still a few points short. With his stack building high, he desperately used a long bar to get a triple, but this activated the kill screen. He still needed 3,000 points. Harry had to find a way to clear 2 more lines while playing at kill screen speed.
Yes!
History was made. The congratulations poured in as Harry had taken Tetris to new heights. After all the max outs that came before him, from the internet claims to the ones with concrete proof, this one was the best of all. Except, it's never quite that easy with NES Tetris. There are reports that, around the time of Harry's 1.2, a player named Bo Steele achieved a 1.2 million game of his own. Nobody remembers what his exact score was, or what the level of proof was, but Bo is a verified max-out player, so his score claim isn't unreasonable. Still, Harry Hong gets the most credit for being the first to achieve 1.2 million, and he was one of the best players in the world, one of the few who was capable of a score this high. However, as good as Harry was, there was still another player who had potential to go even higher. See, every year since 2010, the biggest Tetris tournament was the Classic Tetris World Championship, where the best NES Tetris players in the world competed. Of the 7 annual tournaments by this point, 1 had been won by Harry Hong. As for the rest, all 6 were won by the same player, Jonas Neubauer.
And your winner of the 2016 Classic Tetris World Championships, 6-time world champion, Jonas Neubauer!
Lululemon Icebreaker Shorts. Get into it. When you're free to test your limits, you can push yourself to new heights. Don't pop it, patch it. Mighty Patch Pimple Patches absorb gunk overnight. Pimple, meet your Mighty Patch.
Legend versus newcomer? Reese's, I'm not gonna choose sides. I'm just gonna eat them.
In the 12 years since his first recorded max out, Jonas had turned into a monster. Every year, he went head-to-head against Tetris' best players. Time and time again, Jonas proved better than the rest. His stacking was brilliant. He was able to get out of trouble when others couldn't. Jonas Neubauer was simply considered the best NES Tetris player on Earth. Yet through all this, he had never really cared about the score world record. He was more focused on tournaments. But in 2017, he started streaming on Twitch. And on July 24th, he booted up a casual game of Tetris. That was 17 straight Tetrises to open the game. Unbelievable. He slowed down a bit after that, but still managed to max out in mid-level 26. And then, he landed 6 more Tetrises before the kill screen. Jonas' score ran all night since he wasn't using the uncap code, but in reality, his score was 1,211,000 points. On a random game where he didn't even bother to use the uncap code, Jonas had just set a new world record. After this, Jonas went back to focusing on tournaments, not caring to improve the high score record anymore. And while other players continued to put up new scores, some of which were over 1 million, very few were able to approach a score of 1.2 million. This type of game was reserved for only the best of the best Tetris players, and even they couldn't consistently put up scores like this. It took a lot of luck to get long bars when you need them. So, Jonas instead prepared for the 2017 Classic Tetris World Championship. And that November, he officially made it 7 World Championship victories.
There it is! Jonas is your champion! 2017 champion!
There was nobody else on his level. And in June 2018, a year after his 1.21 million game, Jonas set out to improve the score world record, trying to take it to a level where nobody else could even touch it. This time, Jonas wasn't messing around. He was using the uncap code, so he could know right away what his score was. On June 13th, he got a really good game going, a max out in level 25. After landing 5 more Tetrises, his score was just short of 1.2 million, with only 4 lines until the kill screen. Jonas built a center well, waiting for the long bar that would push him over the top. And then, he got it.
Let's go!
New world record, 1.23 million. But Jonas wasn't satisfied yet. A week later, he managed another level 25 max out. He then got 6 more Tetrises, pushing his score past 1.2 million. 1 more Tetris, and he'd have another record. But then, his stack started building high. Jonas wasn't getting a long bar, and he was quickly running out of room. Yet, he didn't panic, and finally, the long bar came.
Oh, let's go! Get out of my face!
A 15,000 point improvement to the world record. This was the state of NES Tetris in mid-2018. There were many good players. Some of them could score over 1 million points. But when all else was held equal, Jonas usually came out on top. He always won the World Championship. He had the score record, and it was intimidating to compete against him. It seemed like, as long as he wanted to hold the high score world record, he'd be able to do so. That is, unless Corion had something to say about it. In 2016, a player named Corion posted a video of his first NES Tetris max out. By this point, several players had achieved the max out, so the achievement alone wasn't too notable. However, when he posted a video with a hand cam, Corion was shown to be doing something very differently. He was mashing the D-pad to move the pieces laterally, rather than simply holding it down. In Tetris, there's a concept known as the delayed auto shift, or DAS. When you hold down the D-pad in NES Tetris, your piece will auto-shift to the side every 6 frames, or 10 times per second. This is quite fast, and leaves you with enough time to navigate even on the breakneck speed of level 19. However, Koryon is from Japan, and NES Tetris was never actually released in Japan. So, his background was from playing various other versions of Tetris, including the Game Boy edition. In Game Boy Tetris, when you hold down the D-pad, the piece hesitates momentarily and then moves roughly 7 times per second. This process is too slow when playing at higher levels, so Game Boy Tetris players have to repeatedly repress the D-pad to move their pieces quickly enough. And since Koryon was used to playing this and various arcade games, it was only natural to mash the D-pad in NES Tetris as well. But this actually gave Koryon an advantage. He was able to accurately mash faster than Das normally moved the pieces. He could move blocks just a little bit quicker than normal. And it meant that once he reached the kill screen on level 29, he actually stood a chance to clear a few lines. He couldn't play for long, but it wasn't necessarily an instant game over. In June 2017, he managed to clear 10 lines on level 29 and reach level 30. Only a couple other players had ever done that before, and not surprisingly, they had to use a form of hyper-tapping to pull it off. Ultimately, though, this just let Koryon get a few more points before topping out. If he wanted to beat the score world record, he needed to focus on getting more Tetrises before the kill screen. He spent months improving his skills, and by August 2017, he became the 3rd player to pass 1.2 million. But as Jonas kept improving the record, Koryon found himself falling behind. And by June 2018, the score to beat was 1.245 million. But Koryon didn't want to give up. Even though he was a bit behind Jonas, the potential with hyper-tapping was just too strong. That summer, Koryon began a push for the world record. And on June 24th, he had a strong game going. Landing Tetris after Tetris, Koryon's score climbed past 600,000. Then, the game transitioned to level 19. This is where hyper-tapping would really come into play. Right away, he managed to get a long bar over in a spot that would have been risky with Das. He kept on going, precisely navigating pieces while frantically mashing on the D-pad. He ended up maxing out the score during level 25, just about tied with Jonas' world record. The Tetrises continued, and eventually, Koryon found himself at 1.22 million, with only one line until the kill screen. He just needed one more Tetris. Koryon was praying that it would come in time.
One. Freeze! Freeze, come on! Yes! Woo! Yes! 1.25.
This was the first ever game past 1.25 million. And finally, 7-time world champion Jonas had been dethroned. This game helped prove the use of hyper-tapping. While Koryon wasn't guaranteed to have topped out with Das, there were definitely situations where hyper-tapping helped. The problem is, Koryon was one of few players who could reliably hyper-tap. He not only had to mash quickly, but also do it in a controlled manner to always move your piece the exact right amount. Koryon focused on other categories for the next few months, but in early 2019, he came back, looking to take the record closer to 1.3 million. And on March 5th, he'd get a good chance. His start was very smooth, and the only sketchy moment came at 800,000, when he misdropped and then narrowly brought a long bar over to the right in time. That's where hyper-tapping can help you. He ended up maxing out the score in late level 25. With 30 lines until the kill screen, Koryon had just enough room to get 8 more Tetrises and finish off one more improvement to the world record.
Yes! Yes! I'm within my world record! Yes!
This was a really great game, yet still remained 27,000 points short of 1.3 million. That score still seemed like a pipe dream. The only way to do it would be to get an earlier max out, and then match Corion's 8 Tetrises afterwards. And with Corion being one of the few hyper-tappers with the skills to do that, 1.3 million was just a bit out of reach.
Each cat is incredibly unique. Feed your cat's unique needs with Royal Canin Precise Nutrition.
Amino Kids, created just for big kids' sensitive skin and still developing hair.
The all-new Milo's Rewards program is here. Download the app to join, earn, and save today.
A few months after Corion's 1.27 game, one of the strangest events in Tetris history took place. One day in June 2019, a man named Tyler Peach popped up in the Discord server. Tyler said he was from Germany, and that back in the mid-90s, he scored 1.33 million in a game of NES Tetris. This was a bold claim. For one thing, it was 60,000 points ahead of the current highest known score. And for another, the uncapped code didn't exist in the 90s. So how did he know what his exact score was? Tyler tried to convince people he was legit, but he came across as some random dude just making outrageous claims. So, to show his skills, Tyler said he would attempt to qualify for the July monthly tournament. And then... Tyler proceeded to post the highest qualifying score ever for a tournament. Only a handful of players had ever achieved the 1.2, and Tyler just did it on command to show his skills. He immediately began doing live streaming attempts to break the score world record, and just days later, he achieved a score of 1.298 million, smashing the world record by 25,000 points. He maxed out in level 24, one level sooner than Corion did, and proceeded to match his 8 Tetrises afterwards. And while Tyler didn't use a webcam, it seemed that he too was hyper-tapping. He was able to get his pieces to fly across the board. Who on earth was this guy? Were his scores faked somehow? Nobody knew for sure, and the top players had a variety of opinions. But there was nothing in Tyler's gameplay that screamed it was fake. The circumstances were just so weird. A legend from the 90s, who nobody had heard of before, coming back and crushing the competition. The story sounded too insane to be real. Well, months down the road, the truth came out. Tyler's scores were 100% legitimate, but he wasn't a real person. Tyler was actually the alt account of one of the best Tetris players in the world. He was the teenage prodigy, Joseph Saley. Joseph came onto the Tetris scene in 2017 and spent hours watching the game's 2 best players, Jonas and Corion. He learned a lot from them, and Joseph's skills rapidly improved. By March 2018, he achieved his first max out. By September, his score was up to 1.15 million. In less than a year, he had become a world-class player. However, there were still a handful of players who had a better score than he. But a few months later came the 2018 Classic Tetris World Championship. Joseph entered the tournament and played beautifully, defeating opponent after opponent and making it all the way to the finals. And what a surprise! The other finalist was Jonas Neubauer, the 7-time world champion. Jonas was heavily favored to defeat Joseph and take home his 8th title. But in a shocking twist, Joseph swept Jonas 3-0.
And we have a new Tetris World Champion.
Joseph Saley was now a world champion. But despite that, he didn't have the score world record. That still belonged to Corion. So, in early 2019, he made an effort to take it. First passing 1.2 million, then 1.25 million. But he still remained a bit short of the record. And that's where he decided to have some fun. Joseph started streaming attempts to an alt account and built up the Tyler Peach persona. And even though he didn't do many attempts there, one of them ended up breaking the world record. So, he decided to roll with it, before eventually revealing that he was behind it all. So now, Joseph had them both, the championship title and the score record. But even beyond that, Joseph had one specific skill that no other Tetris player had. He could actually play on the kill screen. Joseph was a hyper tapper, and a very good one at that. He moved pieces quicker than anyone else. The kill screen kicks in on level 29, and in September 2018, Joseph became the first person to make it to level 31 on video. A month later, he became the first to make it to level 32. It was amazing. Kill screens are not meant to be playable, but Joseph was doing it. He couldn't go for long, but he was legitimately clearing lines and even full levels. He was even outsmarting the developers. Upon reaching level 30, the game's level counter appears bugged. Tetris' programmers did not expect anyone to make it here. Joseph was doing what was thought to be impossible. But as impressive as this was, it wasn't enough to get the score record. Joseph would still have to maximize his Tetrises earlier to really rack up the score. And not only that, but he wasn't the only one gunning for the world record. Harry Hong and Corion, two previous record holders in the category, were interested in trying as well. And so, it became a three-way race between Harry, Corion, and Joseph for the first 1.3 million score in NES Tetris. Harry was the first to strike. In August 2019, he got a new high score of 1.275 million. This was short of the 1.298 world record, but those who thought Tyler P was cheating considered this score the official world record. Still, it didn't reach 1.3 million. Harry would have needed one more Tetris before the kill screen to push him over the top. Instead, maybe Corion could get the 1.3. He was the more recent record holder, and his personal best remained at 1.273 million. Perhaps his hyper-tapping skills would be enough to get him there. In November, Corion had a great game going. He got a max out in level 25, then landed 7 Tetrises, pushing his score past 1.2 million. After getting another Tetris, Corion was in position to crush his PB, and maybe get 1.3 million if he could just get one final Tetris.
なんとしにちゅうさん頑張ろうねなんとしにちゅうさん
Corion got a massive long bar throughout and couldn't get the last Tetris he needed. But of the three players, the one with the best chance at 1.3 million was Joseph. He'd already gotten 1.298 million on the Tyler account. He only needed a tiny improvement to get him there. Well, that December, Joseph found himself in nearly the exact same position as Corion. A max out in level 25 and needing one more Tetris for 1.3 million. This could be it. But the long bar had to come in time.
Yes! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh, Jesus Christ!
Joseph already had 1.3 million, but then he landed a Tetris on the kill screen. This move was only possible with good hyper-tapping, not DAS. This gave him another 36,000 points, and pushed him past 1.35 million. It was the first time anyone had ever gotten substantial points on the kill screen in a record, and it raised all sorts of questions. Was this move realistic to replicate? How many kill screen points could you get? And since he was past 1.35 million, could Joseph get the score record to 1.4 million? This score would have nearly sounded impossible just weeks earlier. there was a blueprint. We'd already seen Joseph get 1.3 million points going into the kill screen. If he could land a few Tetrises and get 100,000 points on the kill screen, that would be enough for 1.4 million. Joseph was the only player who could realistically do this. And a few months later, when the pandemic hit, he decided to fully commit and make a push for the 1.4. This was going to be an intense grind. Joseph had to maximize points everywhere, both before and during the kill screen. For one thing, he decided to start on level 19 rather than 18. That meant that pieces fell faster, but it also allowed him to rack up more points, potentially 30 to 40,000 more than starting on level 18. And Joseph needed every point he could get. He couldn't afford to burn lines. He had to nearly exclusively go for Tetrises to maximize points. Yet, as tough as all this was, it was actually the easy part of the grind. The hard part was then scoring 100,000 more points on the kill screen. Joseph could score 1.3 million by level 29, but getting the last 100,000 at this speed was brutal. As fast of a hyper tapper as it was, the kill screen was still the kill screen. You're not intended to play at this level. And Joseph had run after run die after making it this far. Clearly, 1.4 million would require the stars to align. Well, that June, Joseph would get a chance. He got a max out in level 25 and arrived at the kill screen just shy of 1.3 million points. He'd been here before. Now, he had to make it to 1.4.
Oops. Hey, this world record though. Nice.
A new record, but Joseph seemed to barely care. It was still 25,000 short of 1.4 million. This game really illustrates the dilemma when playing on the kill screen. Do you try and keep your stack low to survive as long as possible? Or try to rack up points quickly by going for Tetrises? Eventually, Joseph found a solution. Why not just get to the kill screen with a crazy score so you don't need that many points?
Dude.
You got it.
No. It's not good. Oh my god! We're on the record though. Dude.
This pace was insane. Even scoring just one Tetris on the kill screen would have been enough for 1.4. But Joseph couldn't survive long enough to get a Tetris. He topped out just 10,000 points short. Still though, clearly he was closing in on 1.4 million. It seemed like it could be just days away. Well, on June 14th, 2020, Joseph started a game on level 18 rather than 19 and set a score of 1.384 million. This was the highest ever score from a level 18 start, a notable achievement. So, Joseph stopped recording on OBS and uploaded the video to YouTube. But then, he forgot to hit record again and continued playing for the record. Joseph was oblivious to the fact that his gameplay wasn't being saved. And hours later, he allegedly achieved a score of 1.439 million. Obviously, this game can't be viewed today. He was streaming it to a Discord call, though, and one of his friends was recording the audio of said call, where you can hear people freaking out at what Joseph was doing. All because of a practice known as vaulting. See, Cheese had a habit of playing games, sometimes even getting a world record score, and then only telling certain friends about it. Sometimes he did eventually upload his scores, and other times he didn't. Cheese gave various reasons for doing this: to better space out YouTube uploads, to make memes with his friends, and sometimes just because he could. So, we don't have a perfectly accurate record timeline, but we do know bits and pieces of it. In late 2021, Cheese allegedly achieved a new record of 1.7 million and didn't upload the video. However, it's unclear if this was before or after Huff's 1.676 million game, and we don't know what Cheese's exact score was. That being said, Cheese didn't vault all of his scores. He was an amazing player, and sometimes he had to play live, like when he had to qualify for a tournament. Since this was a qualifier, Cheese was just going for a decent score, not anything crazy. Well, 9 minutes later, he entered the kill screen at just 1.075 million. A good qualifying score, sure, but this was the lowest score at this point compared to any world record in the last 10 years. So, if you wanted a record here, this game would have to go deep. Cheese needed to pull off a miracle on the kill screen. For the next 13 levels, it wasn't looking like a miracle, but Cheese was surviving. He wasn't landing any Tetrises, so he didn't get many points, but he also wasn't topping out. Then, suddenly, he misdropped in level 43, and things got ugly fast. His stack piled high, and it looked like this was the end. Cheese's score was at 1.3 million, a fantastic qualifying score. He hadn't hit any Tetrises on the kill screen, and he was way short of the world record. Nobody would blame Cheese for just topping out here and being satisfied. But instead, he did this.
$1.9! Let's go! Oh my god! 2 million!
This is insanity, honestly. I never expected to get this high of a score. GG. That's a good game. Best game I'll ever play.
Cheese went from 0 Tetrises and 1.3 million points to 11 Tetrises and 2.3 million points. This was the biggest world record increase in the game's history, and also the first time anyone had ever reached level 60. Just a legendary game. The community was shaken. This score was so far ahead of anyone else. It was hard to imagine playing for so long while also landing Tetris after Tetris. The inventor of rolling had just mastered his craft. And over the next several months, Cheese's 2 million score stood alone. While others tried and did improve their scores, none were able to crack 2 million. The world record remained a major outlier. Yet, despite this, Cheese was able to improve it once again. In January 2022, he set a new high score of 2.7 million. And unfortunately, this was another vaulted score. Video of the game has never been made public, and what little info we do have comes from the description of Cheese's 2.3 million game. Then, a few months later, Cheese got a score of 2.34 million points on video while qualifying for the April tournament. This eked out his highest recorded game, but was well short of his 2.7 million vaulted score. But no matter which of these 3 games you look at, Cheese was the premier player of NES Tetris. Nobody else could roll as long and as consistently as he could. And that's why he was the only player getting scores like this. But still, while they lagged behind Cheese, other players were improving their rolling skills. And with tournaments happening every month, there was active competition for the score record. One such competitor was Eric ICX. Eric was a good player, and he'd set some community milestones over the years. As a hyper tapper, he was the first person to reach levels 37 and 38. And while he was a good roller too, he lagged behind most other top players. His high score was just short of 1.5 million, and in 13th place overall. Well, on On April 1st, 2022, Eric got a great game going. He entered the kill screen at 1.282 million points, a fantastic pace. Minutes later, he passed 1.5 million and broke his personal best. And then, Eric went on what can only be described as a miracle run. He landed a Tetris on level 46, then another on level 58. In level 64, he'd been playing for so long that his camera shut off. And moments later, he broke Cheese's recorded world record of 2.34 million. This was unreal. Eric was great, but he was not expected to be a world record contender. He hadn't even gotten 1.5 million before. Now, his score was passing 2.4 million, with no signs of stopping anytime soon. By this point, another concept had come into play: scaling. As mentioned earlier, when you get a Tetris, the amount of points it's worth is determined by this formula. Basically, the higher the level, the more points you get. When Eric first entered the kill screen on level 29, his Tetrises were worth 36,000 points. But now entering level 70, any Tetris would be worth 84,000 points. And as the level climbed higher, these Tetrises became even more valuable. That's what scaling is. It's essentially the opposite of diminishing returns. The longer you play, the quicker your score rises. And that's exactly what happened to Eric. By the time he hit level 73, he had passed Cheese's vaulted score of 2.73 million. This game was now the undisputed world record, and it was still going. Eric passed level 80, and then level 90. In level 92, he managed to hit a Tetris worth over 112,000 points. Finally, in level 95, Eric topped out. His final score was 3.772 million. Eric had just broken the world record by over 1 million points. He had more than doubled his own personal best, and he had achieved the game's first ever double rollover. The hexadecimal digit rolls over for a second time at 3.2 million. When he posted his score to Discord, many dismissed it as an April Fool's joke, but they quickly realized this was legit. The world record had been shattered, and Eric was the new champion. So, what did this mean for the Tetris community? Was the world record now unbeatable? Well, look, getting a game to level 95 like Eric did would be close to impossible. This game was such an outlier that even Tetris's best players couldn't make it near that deep. But Eric's score was a different story. Scaling made it so that Tetrises were worth 100 grand by the end of the game. So if someone could reach level 70 or 80 again, and land a few more Tetrises than Eric, their score could shoot up past 3.7 million without having to make it as deep as level 95. It wasn't likely, but there was a path to beating his world record. And over the next few months, some of the game's top players tried. They worked on surviving on the kill screen for as long as possible. Even if they didn't need to make it to level 95, they still had to last a long time. But ultimately, nobody could do it. And Eric's legendary 3.7 million score stayed on top. But of course, the NES Tetris community is much bigger than this one world record. Tournaments have always been a big part of Tetris, and each month there was a Masters tournament featuring most of the game's top players. The majority of these tournaments aren't important for this video, but there's one match in the August 2022 edition that we need to take a look at. It was a battle between two titans, Huff, the former world record holder, and Eric, the current record holder. And they were going to compete head-to-head in a best-of-5. Eric's 3.7 million score still stood as the world record, but Huff was the only player who would come close to him. His personal best of 3 million points was in second place. These were quite possibly the two best Tetris players in the world, trying to score as high as they could against each other. Game 1 began, and it was clear both of these guys came to play. They both made it to the kill screen, before Huff finally topped out in level 41. Game 1 went to Eric. Game 2 began, and it looked like a repeat of Game 1. Both players were locked in and made it to the kill screen. But this time, Huff had a slight lead over Eric, 1.1 million to 950k. They both survived to level 40, with Huff retaining his point lead. A few minutes later, both players arrived at level 50, and at this point, the game was entering rare territory. In the entire history of Tetris monthly tournaments, only 4 games had ever survived to level 50. The fact that this one had both players still alive was astounding. But Huff and Eric weren't done yet. A few levels later, they both rolled over the score. Huff still had a 100,000 point lead, but Eric wasn't backing down. As they both hit level 60, the game entered legendary status. This had become much more important than just a tournament match. Eric and Huff were so locked in that there was no telling how high they'd go. They kept cruising through the 60s. But suddenly, on level 66, Huff needed to get a long bar all the way to the left. He started his roll too late, and it was all over. Huff topped out after an incredible performance all the way to level 66. Eric now needed just 100,000 more points to win the game, but he was already in rare territory. This chart shows all games that have made it to the kill screen in the last year of monthly tournaments. Making it past level 40 was very rare, while making it past level 50 was almost unheard of. The best tournament game ever made it to level 67. Huff had made it to level 66, just one level short. And yet, Huff ended up losing this game to Eric. Here's why. This is how far Eric ended up making it. According to Eric, once he broke the score record in level 105, his nerves went away. At that point, he was playing with the house's money. And that's what ultimately allowed him to play another 40 levels without topping out. Meanwhile, all Huff could do was watch. He simply looked on in astonishment as Eric completely destroyed the game in front of him. And at the end, he applauded Eric, said cheers, and sat back in his chair. People had known NES Tetris would eventually get to this point, but Eric had rapidly accelerated that timeline. The goal was simple: last as long as possible on the kill screen. And while the best players have been able to survive for 10, even 15 minutes before, Eric had just survived for 28 minutes, double anyone else's best performance. In case there was any doubt, this game had made it crystal clear. The days of needing to maximize your score early with Tetrises were now over. Now, Tetris was a game of survival and endurance, and nobody else could keep up with Eric. Eric had made it to level 146. However, the game's developers never intended anyone to make it past level 29, since the kill screen speed kicks in. And from level 30 onwards, they never checked that all their code still operated correctly. Now, most things still work fine, but gradually, as you get deeper and deeper beyond level 29, Tetris begins to break more and more. The first sign of this is the level counter appearing bugged starting on level 30. The game plays exactly the same, except with this one graphical glitch. But upon reaching level 138, the game starts to deteriorate a bit more. Tetris normally has 10 color palettes, one for each of the levels 0 through 9, that then loop every 10 levels. This system works great for dozens of levels, even well beyond level 29. But by level 138, the game suffers from an integer overflow bug and believes you're on a negative level. So, it pulls a color palette from an incorrect place, and the result is these bizarre looking colors. Starting from level 138 and looping every 54 levels here on out, each level has a glitched color palette. Some are stranger looking than others, but for the most part it doesn't impact the gameplay. It's just an aesthetic glitch, much like the bug level counter. Except, some color palettes are so dark that you can barely see them on a normal TV. The first one of these is on level 146, a mixture of dark blue, dark green, and black. Programmer Greg Cannon went through all the glitched colors and assigned nicknames to them. Level 146 got the nickname Dusk. Sure enough, Dusk was the level that took Eric out. He couldn't see the pieces anymore. He probably could have gone a lot longer had it not been for this level, but it marked the end of his 6.4 million point game. If someone wanted to beat Eric's score, they'd most likely not only need to make it back to the glitched colors, but also find a way to make it past Dusk. And right now, nobody was close to doing either of those things. In all honesty, the rest of the community was just trying to play catch-up with Eric. But as the months passed in 2022, players tried to close the enormous gap in scores. In September 2022, Alex Thatch became the second player to break 4 million points. And a few months later, Dog playing Tetris passed 5 million points. Yet both players remained well short of Eric's score, and neither of them reached the glitched colors. After these scores, there was nearly no activity at the top level for close to a year. New players managed to reach 3 and 4 million points, but the very top remained unchanged. Eric's 6.4 million score towered above the rest, too daunting to try and even approach. The community needed some form of motivation, and right around then, in November 2023, they got that motivation in the form of a tournament. No Cap November. See, tournament games used to be no more than 10 minutes each. You'd rack up as many points as you could, then hit the kill screen on level 29 and top out. But then rolling came along, allowing players to last much longer on the kill screen. And tournament games turned into marathons of endurance, rather than going for points. So, organizers began forcing players to stop at level 39, restoring the original purpose of the kill screen. But just for fun in November 2023, the community decided to do one tournament under the old rules. Players would be allowed to play indefinitely at the level 29 speed, with no cap at level 39. So, to prepare for the tournament, players began practicing level 29 more than ever before. They tried to build up stamina to outlast everyone else. And it turns out, this practice is exactly what the community needed, because in the build-up to the no-cap tournament, for the first time in over a year, new players reached the glitched colors. A player named Gerald Freeman reportedly got a score of 6.321 million points. In true Tetris fashion, it was unrecorded, but also short of the world record. Instead, the score we're going to look at is one performed by Pixel Andy on November 17th, 2023. Andy had been a top-tier player for years now, constantly in the top 10, but never holding the record. But during tournament practice, he'd gotten even better, and now he was able to take a run at the top spot. Andy hit the kill screen, and then began clearing level after level. 40, then 60, then 80, and then 100. Pixel Andy was starting to approach the glitched colors. The world record was getting closer, but he'd likely still have to beat Dusk. Passing level 120, Andy was still rolling. But then, just 8 levels away from glitched colors, he misdropped. Thankfully, his stack was still low, and it was a quick recovery. But it was a sudden reminder of how quickly things can get out of hand. On level 138, Andy entered the glitched colors. 8 levels to go before reaching dusk. He played through the bizarre-looking colors and was moments away from level 146. It was time for dusk. And yet, when he got there, I don't think he was ready for it.
E009, what is this? Wait, I actually can't see, I don't know. Wait, I genuinely can't see. What are these? Who made these colors? Why would you choose that? There we go.
He did it, and was immediately treated with a much brighter level 147. This was it. Pixel Andy was locked in. He'd survived Dusk's color palette, and now there was no telling how long he could play for. Until he made it to the very next level.
What is going on? Wait, the colors. I can't see it. No, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it on my screen. It just went dark.
Yeah, Dusk isn't the only hard color palette. Just 2 levels later, on level 148, you encounter Charcoal. It features a mix of white, dark gray, and black. And it's even harder than Dusk.
I need better credit card rewards.
Try my travel points calculator.
No thanks. This is better. 75k bonus miles and lounge access. Love it.
Everything you need to outsmart the system. Intuit Credit Karma.
Yeah, I'm up on the cloud, ain't coming back down.
Try crunchy, melty, rich toasted chips. Inside every dog lives a wolf. So feed them natural Blue Wilderness dog food with high-quality meat as the first 3 ingredients. And now at PetSmart, Treats members save 35% on their first Blue Buffalo auto ship order. PetSmart. Anything for pets.
After playing 147 levels beautifully, Andy was not ready for Charcoal. He'd made it over 6.4 million points, and he topped out just 57,000 shy of Eric's world record. A heartbreaking finish. Now, this was a new record for the highest level reached, 2 levels higher than Eric, but the glitched colors were a problem. Dusk and Charcoal had taken out both players who'd made it this far. But to significantly raise the score record, you'd need to make it past both these levels. The community was at an impasse. Someone had to find a solution. Maybe that someone could be Fractal. Fractal broke onto the scene in 2019, achieving his first max out. And since then, all he'd done was improve. He'd taken his score to 5.7 million points. And that November, he won the 2023 Classic Tetris World Championship.
Champion! Fractal has done it!
Now, despite being 4th on the score leaderboard, Fractal is considered to be Tetris' best overall player. He was also the most likely candidate to break Eric's record. Fractal had some history with the glitched colors. Back in 2022, he technically became the first player to ever reach them, but he did so on the PAL version of the game, which runs 17% slower. This made the kill screen speed easier and helped Fractal survive. When Eric reached the glitched colors on NTSC, he got the credit and attention. Deservedly so, since doing it at a faster speed was much harder. Now in 2023, Fractal tried to prepare himself for Dusk and Charcoal. He practiced these levels extensively, making sure he wouldn't be caught off guard by their dark color palettes. But still, for Fractal, reaching the glitched colors kind of felt like been there, done that. He was the world champion, and was probably the best player in the community. So, Fractal didn't just want the world record. Instead, he set his sights even higher. He wanted to reach NES Tetris' true kill screen, the game crash. As mentioned earlier, the deeper you play in Tetris, the more it breaks. Initially, these are purely aesthetic glitches. Eventually, the game deteriorates even more. On level 30, the level counter breaks. On level 138, the colors glitch. And on level 155, the game can become completely unplayable. NES Tetris is an old game. Its code works very well during normal gameplay, but these players were taking the game further than the original programmers ever dreamed. And as the level climbs higher, the game's code gets very inefficient with updating the score. Eventually, it takes so long to update the score that the game has to draw the graphics when it's not supposed to. And as a result, it tries to read RAM as code. Depending on what it reads, if a stop command is generated, then the game will simply crash on the spot. Now, this crash doesn't just automatically happen at a certain level. Various conditions have to be met, taking into account what level you're on, what piece you have, how many lines you clear, and more. Hydra Dude created a spreadsheet showing all the spots where the game can crash on an unmodified Tetris cartridge. And it turns out the first place the game crash can occur is by clearing a single line on the transition into level 155. This crashes the game every time. However, by this point, no top player was using an original Tetris card. Instead, they were all playing on Tetris Gym, a modified ROM that completely changed the scoring mechanism. And as a result, the game crash doesn't occur on Tetris Gym. So if you wanted to go for a game crash, you had to use an original cartridge with no uncap code. That meant your score would have to be manually calculated afterwards, a major pain. But Fractal knew that it would be worth it. For years, level 29 had been called Tetris' kill screen. But it wasn't a kill screen anymore. Players could survive on that speed for a long time. But this game crash was the true kill screen of Tetris. There was no way to play onward once the game crashed. For 34 years, every game of NES Tetris ever played had ended in the player topping out. Now, Fractal had the chance to change that. He could be the first person to beat Tetris. And he wasn't that far away. The world record had already made it to level 148. If Fractal could just make it 7 more levels, then land a single into level 155, he would crash the game. It was within his reach. But standing in his way was Charcoal, the level that nobody had beaten before. If Fractal couldn't find a way to beat it, then he'd have no hope of crashing the game. Over the next few weeks, Fractal practiced extensively. He came up with strategies of staying alert on the dim levels. He built his consistency with rolling. And eventually, he felt he had a good chance to make it past Charcoal. Finally, it was time. Fractal's years of playing Tetris had all led up to this. He was ready to start streaming attempts to crash the game. Fractal went live and started playing. But just an hour into his first night of attempts, someone else shocked the world. This is Blue Scooty, and he had just made it past Charcoal in a live game. Blue Scooty was an elite player, but not considered to be quite on Fractal's level. Just weeks ago, he finished 3rd place in the Tetris World Championship that Fractal won. But with his personal best at 5.2 million, the world record was technically within reach. And now, he had just become the first ever player to make it past Charcoal. Scooty was able to hold it together for a few more levels, but ended up topping out in level 153. His final score, 6.6 million, a new world record. All of a sudden, Fractal had serious competition in getting the first game crash. Scooty was just 2 levels short. Now, he was playing on Tetris Gym, so even if he'd made it to 155, the game wouldn't have crashed. But now, Scooty realized how close he was to making history, and he too switched to playing on the original cartridge. It was now a 2-way race for the first game crash. The world champion Fractal against the newcomer Blue Scooty. The pressure was on for Fractal, and he was more determined than ever. After seeing Scooty's new record, he continued with his attempts, and within hours, he had another chance. He made it to level 130, just 25 levels away from the game crash. On level 133, it started to get dicey. He misdropped a couple pieces, and his stack piled high. Fractal decided to go for a risky maneuver to save his game. He dropped the T-piece here, and at the last moment, rotated to fit in this gap. It was a precise move, and it was his best chance to keep the game alive. And just like that, it was over. 22 levels from the crash. All he could do was keep trying. The very next day, he got another one going. He played beautifully for half an hour, and eventually made it right back to level 130. But just like yesterday, it started to unravel. A long bar drought combined with misdrops caused his stack to rise. Fractal hadn't come all this way just to top out in level 130 again. He had to find a way to dig out of this. Just incredible work. The game was alive. 20 levels till the game crash.
You ready? I'm not ready.
Oh, okay.
Came over on level 137. Just 18 levels short of the crash. Any of these games could have been the one. Fractal couldn't stop now. He kept his stream going, and within hours, he found himself on another promising game. He once again passed level 100, then made it to level 130, where all his previous games had fallen apart. But this time, things were different. He kept his stack low, and ended up reaching the glitched colors. 17 levels to go until the game crash. Fractal powered through the different color palettes, and he knew what was coming next. Dusk and charcoal. He'd mentally prepared himself for them, and felt there was a good chance he'd make it through. Moments later, Fractal entered level 146. It was time for Dusk. Even though he knew what was coming, Fractal was still caught off guard. He instantly misdropped and couldn't recover. This game was enough to beat Blue Scooty back for the score world record, but it remained just 9 levels short of the crash. Finally, Fractal had to stop for the day. That was 3 close calls in just 24 hours. No one could say he wasn't trying, but today, it wasn't happening. He stopped his stream, went to sleep, and the next day he started up attempts again. But just a short while into this stream, his chat let him know that Blue Scooty was on an amazing run.
Wait, what is Scooty at right now? Oh my god.
He had made it all the way to the glitched colors, level 138, 17 levels from the crash. He was quickly approaching Dusk and Charcoal, but Scooty had had success beating those levels before. Now, with the pressure of a game crash on the line, he'd have to do it again. Blue Scooty made it to level 146, stayed calm, and began playing Dusk. Beautiful. 1 down, 1 to go. Charcoal was next, the level that nobody else had beaten before. Scooty knew that if he could beat Charcoal right now, he had a really good chance of getting the crash. This was happening. Blue Scooty was now on level 149, 6 levels from the crash. Fractal couldn't believe what he was watching, and he was cheering him on. Blue Scooty had adrenaline coursing through him. He knew what he had to do. Hold it together for just a few more levels. He kept playing, rolling the pieces into place with no margin for error. The level climbed higher, and finally, he arrived at level 154. Just one more step for the game crash. Transition into level 155 on a single line clear. The strategy here was to keep the stack as low as possible, to make single line clears easy. For 4 lines, all went according to plan. But then, he misdropped an S-piece. His stack started to pile up, but Scooty stayed calm in the face of danger. He continued getting single line clears, until he was just 1 line away from the transition. He now needed 1 more single line clear. But then the game gave him a long bar. And Scooty, perhaps out of habit, took the bait. Scooty had made it to the glitched colors. He'd beaten Dusk and Charcoal. He'd held it together the entire way, and at the last possible moment, he'd still missed the crash. He was flustered, but he knew it might not be over. There were still other places the game could crash. Scooty didn't know exactly where, but he hoped that if he kept going, maybe the game would crash at some point. Scooty played through the next couple levels. He did beautifully given the weight of what had just happened, but the game didn't crash. But in level 157, it was too much. He started misdropping, and it was clear that he wasn't going to be able to recover this. The game would be over in a matter of seconds. Out of desperation, Scooty threw a J piece to the left, hoping that a line clear would somehow crash the game.
Oh my god! Let's go!
Blue Scooty had defeated Tetris. This is the game's true kill screen. It's where Tetris gives up and says you win. Had Scooty missed this 1 line clear, it's unlikely he would have been able to get another one before topping out. And he also had a bit of luck on his side. According to Hydrant Dude's spreadsheet, this line clear only had a 73% chance of crashing the game. But it all lined up. It all worked out, and Blue Scooty crashed the game. But even crazier than the achievement itself was what happened over the next few days. A Game Scout published a video talking about Scooty's accomplishment, and it went viral. 10 million views in a matter of days. Soon, media outlets were picking up on the story. Articles were written. News segments were broadcast. Blue Scooty was interviewed on morning news shows. And then we got to meet the creator of Tetris, Alexei Pajitnov. It was a media phenomenon, one of the biggest stories of the week. And in the background of it all was Fractal. This was supposed to be his achievement. He'd spent years looking into the crash, helping discover what conditions were needed and what caused it. And after years of buildup, somebody else had swooped in and beaten him to it. Now, credit to Scooty. He'd done an amazing job closing out his games. But Fractal had come so close to getting it first. Now, he could only watch as Scooty's accomplishment made headlines around the world. Fractal had to face the facts. He could no longer be the first person to get the game crash. And he wasn't going to get the wave of attention that Scooty got. But he could still finish what he started. So, Fractal continued trying to get his own game crash. It took a couple weeks, and on January 3rd, 2024, he cleared a single line on the transition to level 155.
7, 8, 9.
This wasn't the first game crash, but it was the world record for the earliest game crash. Level 155 versus Scooty's level 157. And while there weren't news stories or Good Morning America interviews for Fractal, the Tetris community knew what he had accomplished. And now, hopefully all of you do too.
Shiba, what cats want.
A wider smile brightens more than just your teeth. Colgate Optic White's unique hydrogen peroxide technology is engineered to remove deeper stains for a visible difference in just 7 days. So you can live life to the brightest.
Thanks to the game crash, the Tetris community had a spotlight on it. New players were getting into the scene, and veterans were playing more than ever before. But now that the game crash was out of the way, people turned their attention back to the score record. It had become a bit lost in all of this, but the highest score of all of these games was Blue Scooty's first game crash, 6.85 million points. And it was beatable. Scooty was playing as safely as he could to make into the crash. So, he only got 3 Tetrises after hitting level 29, leaving lots of points on the table. If someone had the guts to go for a Tetris after reaching the glitched colors, it would be worth over 166,000 points. Land a few of those, and you could crush the score record. Several players ended up going for the record here, but the player who ultimately broke it was Pixel Andy. On January 11th, he started a game that made it to level 29, and for a while, he wasn't going for any Tetrises. But then, they started to pour in.
Good choice. Nice. Nice. Yes, dude. Yes.
By level 130, Andy had already broken the score record before even reaching the glitched colors. But he didn't stop there. He continued landing them, scoring over 170,000 points each time. This hyper-aggressive playstyle was working. His game could end at any moment, but in the meantime, he was racking up the points. Finally, in level 148, Andy topped out. His final score was 8.9 million points, more than a 2 million point improvement to the world record. That's the power of landing Tetris's late. Scaling comes into play, and your score adds up fast. Now, the community had a dilemma. Andy's score record landed so many late Tetrises that beating it by scoring more points wasn't too likely. Instead, players would have to beat his record by playing further than he did. And with the game crash just a few levels away, there didn't seem to be much room there. So, they had two options for how to proceed. Option number 1, crash dodging. Starting on level 155, many levels have some trigger that can cause a game crash. Initially, it's how many lines you clear, and in later levels, it's what pieces you drop. However, these conditions have all been mapped out, so in theory, someone could memorize what to avoid on each level, then dodge crashes to keep playing indefinitely. However, the combination of playing at this speed in the first place, with memorizing conditions on every level, and then executing it at the same time, it would be a lot, even for these amazing players. But there was also an easier option. Players could simply go back to playing on Tetris Gym, which patched the crash, and not have to worry about crash dodging at all. Now, some might argue that this isn't exactly fair, because if you played Tetris on the original cartridge, the crashes would all be present. Why are you allowed to just patch them out like this? There's a wide range of opinions on this topic, and you can come to your own conclusion about what's fair. But there's no denying that removing crashes does simplify things quite a bit. And ultimately, players had been using the gym ROM for years. The reason the game crash was a fun one-off challenge, but now, most agreed it was back to playing on Tetris Gym. And with the crash patched and players breaking new boundaries, these guys had a new race in front of them. The race for 10 million points. The Classic Tetris YouTube channel began hosting weekly Race to 10 Million events, where Blue Scooty, Fractal, Pixel Andy, and a few others all played to break the score record. On top of that, there was a community-funded bounty of $2,600 for the first 10 million point game. There was a lot of anticipation, and with so many top players trying, expectations were just as high. However, weeks passed, and not only was there no 10 million point game, but nobody even improved their high score. Playing long enough to score 10 million points required immense concentration, and when factoring in the pressure to be the first to cross a barrier and the cash bounty at stake, each good game was like a mental battle. Fractal, Blue Scooty, Pixel Andy, Dog, Gerald Freeman, these guys were all good enough to reach 10 million, yet week after week they came up empty. But then, on the night of March 11th, 2024, someone started messaging players in the Classic Tetris Monthly Discord server. These were from another top player, Alex Thatch, and this is what he sent. This was a new world record and just short of the 10 million point barrier. But it was also unrecorded. Now, Alex was definitely a good player, holding a few various records over the years. He used to be one of the fastest hyper-tappers, and was good at rolling too, but had never officially held the score record before. He was claiming to have crushed his recorded PB, offline and without video proof. Alex said he was practicing late at night while listening to Moist Critical, and out of nowhere, he got this crazy game. The general consensus was that the score was likely legit, but without a video, it couldn't be considered official. So, the very next day, Alex Thatch began streaming attempts to prove himself. Now, expecting to match or beat yesterday's score was unreasonable, but if he could put up some decent scores on command, that would help substantiate his 9.9 million claim. Alex sat down and started playing some Tetris, but little did he or anybody watching know that this was going to be the greatest game of Tetris ever performed. It started off like any other. He reached level 29 and decided to play conservatively in hopes of getting into the game.
Slow and steady, like, wins the race, you know?
He kept climbing through levels, and for the most part, his stack stayed very low. And eventually, he passed level 100.
Yes! Level 100! Sheesh, the 3 digits!
The game was starting to get serious, but Alex stayed very calm. On level 138, he entered the glitched colors, and he was cruising. As he reached the dark palettes, he echoed the words Fractal used to lock himself in.
Eyes wide open. Eyes wide open. Eyes wide open!
It worked. Alex played through the 150s, and at this moment, if he was playing on an original cartridge, the game would have likely crashed. Since he was on Tetris Gym, he was able to keep going. And all the while, Alex just kept talking.
Yes! Redemption! This is redemption! Oh my god! And we're gonna keep fighting for this 10 mil. We need to win that bounty. You got nothing on me. I'm gonna keep going. I'm going for the 10 million. And I'm gonna get it.
This was actually a brilliant strategy. The main thing stopping players on these games was themselves. Nerves caught up to them, and they just couldn't hold it together. So to counter that, Alex distracted himself. He hyped himself up. As a result, his nerves melted away.
Get it! Bring it on! Come on!
On level 185, Alex crossed 10 million points. This was now the official world record, and he'd earned the $2,600 bounty. And then he crossed level 190, and then level 200. All the while, he wouldn't be quiet.
Bro, these colors got nothing on me. I like clearly.
On level 216, Alex landed a Tetris. It was worth over 260,000 points. How is this game happening? Could it go on forever? Does Tetris have an end? Well, it sort of does. You can play all the way to level 255, and then the level counter rolls over to 0, and the game essentially restarts. This is known as the rebirth. For years, it was known to exist, but wasn't considered at all viable. But Alex might have a shot at it right now. However, there was still one thing standing between Alex and the rebirth. Level 235. In NES Tetris, levels last 10 lines. However, due to a bug, level 235 is a bit different. It lasts for 810 lines. It's an absolute marathon to make it through, especially with the dark green color palette it has on Tetris Gym. So when Alex entered level 235 moments later, he knew he had a tough task ahead of him.
Oh, wait, what? Wait, this is the 800 lines? Oh my god!
He'd cleared 10 lines so far, only 800 more to go. For the first time all game, Alex stopped talking. He struggled to see the pieces and needed to use all his focus. For 70 more lines, all went well. But eventually, he began to miss drop.
Oh, that might be it. Oh my god! What has... Oh my god! This is redemption! Day 1 of 10 million? Look what we got.
This just completely blew every other game ever played out of the water. To put it in perspective, prior to this game, few people had ever cleared more than 1,400 lines in a game. Alex had just cleared 2,374 lines, and his game lasted a full hour. He had figured out the secret formula to surviving in Tetris. Just distract yourself and don't care. A few weeks later, Alex raised the score slightly to 16.7 million. And to this day, nobody else has beaten his score. But there's no doubt that the rebirth is coming. Alex, Blue Scooty, Pixel Andy, and others have all been trying to make it there. They're certainly all capable of doing it. And sure, it's going to be a slog to make it through the 810 lines of level 235. But if there's one thing we can be sure of, Tetris players are constantly redefining what's possible. And before long, one of these guys will achieve the rebirth. The only question is, who's going to do it first? Thanks for watching. For a behind-the-scenes look at how I made this video and storylines that I couldn't include, join my Patreon page. I only charge when I upload a video. Thanks! Super Mario 64. One of the most iconic...
Just gonna be
competitive. One of the main
Huh.